everybody. Welcome to another episode of Off Script with Pastor Jared. It is good to be with you again. I love these. I love doing these off script episodes for you and with you. Thanks for listening, all you guys that tune in regularly. I really appreciate it. I want to talk to you today about Pride Month. That's right. And I'm going to tell you why. I even shouldn't use that word later, but it is June 21st today. So we are solidly in the middle of the month of June. And if you've been looking around at all, if you've been aware of what's been going on all around you with different companies and their branding and their logos and their slogans and different sort of remarks they're making, statements that they're making, you've noticed, I'm sure, a lot more rainbows than usual. You've noticed that there's been a lot more concentration on gay pride or things like that. And you've seen those letters, LGBTQIA2+. You've seen all of those popping up a lot more recently. The last few years, really, there's been an increase of this. But I want to talk to you today about that as Christians. My guess is if you're listening to this, you're a Christian and you're thinking, how do I rightly respond to this, and how do I live in this world that's clearly surrounding me with sin? So I think you got to start there, okay? If we can't agree that this entire movement, what's called Pride Month, or this LGBTQ panoply of identities, is rooted in sexual sin, we really can't go any further than that. This whole discussion that I want to have is based upon the reality that there is a holy God who sets the standard for righteousness and sin and says what is and is not acceptable moral behavior to him, not to me, not to you, not even to our legal system or the Supreme Court, but before the eyes of God. That's what I'm talking about. That God sets the standard of sin. So sexual sin is pretty much represented in this movement. So when we talk about this, we're talking about the LGBTQIA2+ movement. So let me just tell you what those are, because I know that we have probably a lot of senior adult listeners that are not really keeping up with this, and they don't really know. It's not in their face all day like our younger listeners. So that might be a little uncomfortable for you, but let me tell you what these letters mean. L is lesbian. That means women and women together, okay? Gay is what the G stands for. Typically means men and men, but anymore that's become a broader term, and it can envelop both lesbian and gay. Gay can become an umbrella term. You see it used like that sometimes. B stands for bisexual, meaning that you are a man that has attraction toward men or toward women, or you're a woman who has attraction toward women or toward men, bisexual. T is transsexual, so that would be if you are saying you were born a male, but really you're a female and you identify as female, or the reverse is true. Q can stand for questioning. I've seen it stand for queer. And I'm obviously the farther you go down the line, I'm less familiar. I tends to stand for intersex, and A can stand for asexual. Sometimes I've seen it as ally, and two I've just recently start popping up for two-spirit, and I'm not comfortable enough to give you a definition for that. And then often there's a plus that they'll put at the end just to kind of say there are more than these that are out there, but we're just going to cap it by putting a plus at the end. Okay, so Christians, you're living in a world that is surrounding you with this messaging, and you're seeing pride and rainbow flags and all of this all around you. Unless you have the blessed ability like I do to work in a Christian environment in a church, you're probably confronted with it. Unless you only eat at Chick-fil-A and unless you only shop at Hobby Lobby, chances are you're going to come into contact with this in some way. So what's your response? I know that it's a hard response for Christians to have because we so deeply want to be loving people. We so deeply want to be accommodating. We so deeply want to wrap our arms around people, especially those trapped in sin, especially those going through difficult times in trying to figure out their life. We want to be people of grace and mercy and forgiveness, and we should be. And we want to speak words of encouragement and love, and yes, truth, but yes, love. And we want to do all of those things. And so a lot of times what happens is, in that spirit, which comes from a good place, a healthy, good place, in that spirit, a lot of Christians unknowingly or accidentally, or maybe just out of a compassion gone wild, will end up endorsing a bit more than what they mean to, or giving a bit more license than what they are, knowing what they're doing. So my message to you, Christian, today is this: the most loving thing you can do in the time we're living in right now, as it relates to this movement and this month, is to not give a single inch, not to give 1 inch on this issue, not to try to accommodate or in some form of compassion that's coming from a good place to mildly endorse the movement. Okay. And I want to give you some examples of that. So the first way that I would say we can't accommodate this would be in the most open, obvious, active ways. So what I'm saying is, don't celebrate this. As a Christian, you cannot celebrate sin. So don't go to the Pride Parade. These first ones are going to be obvious. Don't show up at the Pride Parade. Don't take your kids to the drag queen show. Don't go yourself. Don't watch these things online. Don't put the rainbow filter on your social media profile and say, I am an ally. Don't share a post trying to be an ally to your friends. Don't put rainbow stickers on your stuff unless it clearly says, I love Noah and the flood. Don't buy special rainbow edition products that support these causes. I'll give you an example of this as it just crossed my mind. I was going to a Mod Pizza one time just to get one of those make your own pizza places. And I always, one of my little fixes is at the register, they sell these cakes that are like chocolate with filling in the middle. And I love them. They remind me of those old, hey, where's the cream filling, Hostess cakes. And so I get them at Mod, and they're really good. And for this, I think it was last year, this particular month of June, they were selling a rainbow edition of this cake, and it was multicolored and sprinkles, and it said all proceeds from this cake go to, and I forget the cause, but it was an LGBT cause. And so in that moment, I thought, no, I'm not going to buy this cake, even though I buy this cake every time I get a pizza, and I like this cake, and I go to this restaurant. I'm not going to do it. Something just clicked with me and said no. And that's just a small example, and I'm not the noble hero of that story. I'm just telling you that's one. You have to have those moments in your life where you say no. Don't say things that encourage the sin, even if your heart is to try to love people. We want to love people as Christians, but the way that we love them is not to say things that affirms the very sin that's hurting them. So that's the obvious open stuff, okay? I want to give you 3 additional ways that maybe you haven't thought of before. Maybe you have, but what I would call giving passive legitimacy. So everything I just said before was active. Don't show up to the Pride Parade and wave a rainbow flag. Okay, I don't think you were going to do that to begin with. Here's what I think there's most Christians are dealing with is, all right, what about the stuff that's not quite that far? All right, I just have 3. There's probably more. These were the 3 that I've seen most commonly dealt with by well-meaning Christians. All right. Number 1, and it's going to take some work, don't even refer to it as Pride Month. Okay? Don't even yield the definition. I didn't sign up for this to be Pride Month. I don't remember any kind of declaration, that I made that I'm going to agree to that this June, all of June is Pride Month. Really? All of it? You think of all the other holidays that are out there that get one day or, Black History Month gets February, and then all of a sudden, boom, like we're going to pretend it's the same thing. All of a sudden, June is Pride Month. No, it's not okay. I'm not going to call it that. I'm not going to go along and pretend like this is a real holiday. You can't just tell me one day that, August is pink fairy dust and unicorns month, because I don't agree that, and I'm not going to go along with it. So I would say Christians stop referring to June as Pride Month, because every time you do, you cement that you agree that this is a real thing, that you're going along with it, and you're giving legitimacy to the existence of a holiday month that's rooted in a sin. So we can't do that. I would say stop even calling it Pride Month. And that's going to be hard because it's in our language. But I would remind you, most battles for the culture, most battles for the mind or the philosophies of our day are waged first on the battlefield of language. What you agree to in your terms of language often end up creating fences and barriers for your behaviors later. So be very careful in what you call things. All right. So that's number one. Don't even refer to it as Pride Month. Number two, do not refer to LGBTQ or any of those letters as an identity or as a community or as an orientation. Okay? The second you say the LGBTQ community, you have just legitimized that it is a legitimate thing. Or if you say that that your sexual orientation is lesbian, or my orientation, or I identify as bisexual or transsexual, if you say that, then what you have done is just said that you can have a legitimate orientation or identity that is rooted in sin. So I don't even say that. And you're probably thinking, okay, well, what do you say, Pastor? How do you refer to it? I know some of y'all are going to have a hard time with this, but as much as I can, I try to say those who practice the sin of, and then insert the name. So if someone says I'm a lesbian, okay, I try my best not to say lesbian people or those who identify as lesbian or the lesbian community. I try not to say that, even though I will slip at times. I try not to say it. And what I will say is those who participate in lesbian sin, or those who participate in sexual sin that manifest in lesbianism. Because to me, that's a very important difference. Because these are sins. They're not identities. They're not things that take over your whole life and change your personhood, and you are defined as your sexual orientation. I fundamentally disagree with that. So I need to have language that matches what I believe in my heart. Okay, so I don't say, those for transsexuals or trans people. I really don't say that. I will say those who commit the sin of transsexuality, or those who pretend to be men, or those women who pretend to be men. I just think we have to be very careful not to passively agree with the philosophy, even in the way we communicate it. And third, this is going to be even harder, especially those young people that are in academic settings and whatnot. Number three, the way we give passive legitimacy: don't post your pronouns or participate in the delusion of other people. Okay? So you'll see this is very common nowadays in emails or from professional organizations, companies, colleges. You'll see, for example, you might see Jared Kress, pastor, Kirby Woods, and then below it, he/him/they, to say those are my pronouns. And of course, there's a lot of other pronouns that exist. If you don't know what they are, you need to look them up. There's so many pronouns now that are being used. But none of those are rooted in reality or in truth. And so I think Christians, what we want to do, again, is to be kind to other people. And it comes from a good place. And we don't want to be a jerk, and we don't want to harm other people. And so what we do is we'll just kind of play along with the game. We know that Jared's a man. We know that Jared's pronouns are obviously going to be he and him. They always were. They always are. But maybe Jared wants to be nice to people and he says, hey, what? No skin off my nose. What do I care? I don't want to start any fights. I don't want any trouble. If that guy wants to think of himself as a lady, who do I care? That's what a lot of people think. And so they'll just play along and say, Jared Kress, he, him. And then at some point you have to introduce yourself and say, hi, my name's Jared. I identify as male and my pronouns are he, him. And Christians, I just want to say, don't play the game. Don't participate in fantasy. It's not real. So be very careful that in your desire to be nice and to be kind, that what you don't do is perpetuate falsehoods that are trapping people. So, listen, I understand I have the blessing and benefit of working at a Christian place, okay, a church. Some of you work at Christian nonprofits. This is not a problem. Christian schools. I really hurt for y'all that are in secular organizations or government entities, and you're going to have to make some hard calls coming up in the next 10 years. You've got some hard decisions coming your way. But based on God's word, based on standing on the truth, I would seriously encourage you not to participate in playing along in the delusion of other people. It does not help them. It does not help them. Stand firm. Don't even call someone by pronouns that don't fix to reality. Now, what do you do in that situation? What I've done in the past, I'm not saying this is the perfect thing, but when someone has asked me to give a pronoun that clearly is against their gender, I will just ask for their name and call them by their name. And as laborious as that is, not to use pronouns, I will not participate in a false fantasy about someone. I don't think that honors God to just play along and pretend. So these are all examples of passive ways that we sometimes try to go along and get along, but I think it hurts us in the end, church. This is a time right now where we live is a time for truth and for clarity and for boldness. We need to know what truth is. So stand firm, Christian, and do not give this month, do not give these sins an inch. Don't play along. Don't go along and get along. Don't just try to be nice and hope that it all goes away. It won't. We must stand firm and speak the truth, come what may. I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Thank you for being faithful listeners. Please subscribe to this podcast if you haven't yet. Follow it on Apple or Spotify or any of the other places. Share it with a friend if you want to help us get the word out and expand the reach of this podcast. And more than anything else, find you a gospel-preaching church, a Bible-believing church, and go there on Sunday and worship with other believers. If you don't have one and you live in the Memphis, Tennessee area, Kirby Woods Baptist Church. Come shake my hand. I'd love to see you Sunday. God bless.